Interesting. All right. And then, so you're still on staff at UCSD, still doing research, but now you've branched out to do more clinical work and actually help people one-on-one. And that's where your background as a behavioral nutritionist, I think, probably really shines, because we can talk about what to eat all day long, but if people aren't going to actually take the steps to make that part of their lifestyle, it doesn't matter. So, I think a lot of people are unfamiliar probably with behavioral nutrition. I have to admit I was. I didn't realize you could get a degree in behavioral nutrition until we reconnected. And I think that's fantastic because it's so important. So walk us through sort of the thought process of what makes behavioral nutrition different from just nutritional science.
So behavioral nutrition is really the link between nutrition and psychology. So as you said, you can tell someone what to eat, but how to get someone to change what they've eaten for 10, 15, 20 years is very, very difficult. So not only do you have to educate them on what to eat, but you have to educate them how to incorporate that into your lifestyle. Everybody has different lifestyles. One eating plan or diet's going to work for one and not work for the other. But in order to progress somebody to achieving long-term dietary behavior change success, it has to be guided by some kind of behavioral change along the way.
Yeah. And so there are different stages of people being ready for behavioral change or where they are. So tell us about that so people can sort of learn to sort of internalize this with themselves and kind of figure out where they are in that stage. And I'm curious how you approach people differently depending on what stage they're in.
So there's really two major theories that behavioral nutritionists use. It comes from psychology research of behavior change for other conditions such as smoking cessation or even for physical activity. Nutrition is different because everybody has to eat. So figuring out what to eat and how to incorporate that into your life is not as easy. So there's a social cognitive theories, which really look at and try to identify beliefs and attitudes about what they're eating, about how they want to be, about what changes they want to make. So there's a lot of different determinants that can be identified in people as to what's going to create a change. There's a health belief model that looks at perceived risk. So what's the risk of not making the change? So I do that with people who have family histories of chronic disease, someone with a family history of heart disease or diabetes. I say, look, you have a family history. Your father had diabetes. Your grandfather had diabetes. You could be next in line if you don't make the change. So you have to kind of create this risk in their mind. And it's a little, manipulation, but that's kind of what these theories do is they bring this information out for people to really think about it. Or perceived benefits. What are the benefits of making a change? Or the perceived barriers. What barriers do you see that are in the way of making the change? So we work through that and incorporate that into the straight nutrition education. Yeah. Then you also have the stages models, which you're probably familiar with the trans-theoretical model or the stages of change.
Yeah, so before you get into the stages, I want to get into that. But this first model you talked about, sort of like the carrot and the stick model, sort of. And I think it's interesting because, read behavioral therapy or behavioral science, that our brains are wired for the negative far more than the positive.
Right.
So do you find that the stick, the watch out, this is where you're headed, this is where it could be, works better than the carrot, that these are the benefits you might get?
It's really individual, and
Yeah.
It depends on, you have to get to know that person. You have to kind of get a feeling for what's going to work in that person. Sometimes I try one thing, I'm like, oh, that didn't work, I'm going to have to try another thing. So it really is getting to know the person and trying to figure out, how am I going to motivate them? How am I going to really get this information in them and put it to good use? And It really is a skill, which is why I spent 10 years studying behavioral nutrition, because it's not just a book that I can read and say, okay, well, I'm going to try this and this, and if that doesn't work, then too bad. So it really is a skill that I acquired that took a very long time in trying to read the person and figure out which determinant and which motivator or mediator is going to work to get them to say, okay, I need to make this change, and along the way trying to identify the mediators that are going to help progress that person through the journey.
Yeah, with the clients who I work with, either individual consulting or in my 6-month program, I always want them to write down their goals. And a lot of people think
great
it's kind
way.
of hokey and they're like, why do I need to write it down? But it's such an important step. And like you're saying, trying to find their motivator because it's something you need to come back to over and over again. And for some, it could be avoiding the negative, and some people it could be promoting the positive.
Right. Yeah. I always do goal setting. That's one of the first things I do in my first sessions. It's short-term goal setting. So goal setting within a week. And then so the next time I see them, I want to know if those goals have been met and what obstacles or barriers did not allow them to meet those goals. We'll go through that and work through that and then set new goals for every week. And hopefully by the end, they have all these great goals that have helped them get through for long-term success. And then there's always a few longer-term goals that are really more of like a 3 to 6 months out. And goal setting is a super important part.
Yeah, and great point about the difference between the short and the long-term goals. Because if all you set are 6-month or 2-year goals, so easy to get frustrated and give up when you're not progressing. Yeah,
especially with my teenage clients, we do a lot of goal setting, and they're very short-term goals.
Yeah, because that positive feedback is so great. If you can achieve those short-term goals, it really gives you more motivation to continue.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I interrupted you. You were about to talk about the different stages. So let's transition there.
I was talking about the stages of change model.
Yeah.
And that really says that people in different stages, whether they're in pre-contemplation or contemplation or action, they need different motivators, or we need to identify different mediators that are going to help them progress through those stages. So I usually use a combination of all the theories and all the mediators depending on what I see my client needs. But a big thing for the stages of change is self-efficacy, another word for self-confidence. So it's really giving these people the self-confidence and that they can make this change, because that's the biggest thing. Making a dietary change is a huge lifestyle change. It's not very easy. So you have to figure out, how am I going to increase the confidence? How am I going to empower them to be able to be successful with this change and be okay with being out for dinner or in social settings and sticking to their plan and giving them the tools to get through difficult times like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned the pre-contemplation stage. So that's generally sort of the first stage where they're not even really considering a change yet.
Right.
And kind of there's not a whole lot to do at that point,
There's not a
there?
whole lot to do. Unless there is a risk of some condition, unless there is an obesity or something that needs to be done, that you can try to get them through to the contemplation stage.
Right.
So that basically, they don't come to me in the pre-contemplation stage. I usually have to seek people out, or I hear, oh, well, I have this sleep apnea, or I have some condition. And then I said, well, you really should do something about it. And then I try to work with them through that. So yeah, the pre-contemplation is hard to work with, but it's my goal is to get them to contemplation and then to preparation.
Yeah, I think unfortunately I see far more pre-contemplation subjects than you do, because they're in with their heart attack or their complications from diabetes or high blood pressure, and they're not even willing to consider changing their lifestyle yet. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to use that negative as the motivator. But once they get into the contemplation stage, then you sort of can get your hands on them, because now they're thinking about it. Now it's in their brain. And so how do you help them transition to action?
So that's when we start setting goals and talking about barriers and talking about perceived risks and talking about benefits of making the change. So depending on what the person's situation is, I really try to use those determinants of behavior change to really get them into action. And then education is really important in the contemplation stage too. Educating them about nutrition and about food and using evidence-based research to really show this is where the research is and this is where you are, and we really want to be in a different place.
So they've gotten to the contemplation stage, they're starting to think about it, you're educating them, you're goal setting with them, and now it's time for action. So the action stage, is that more about sort of the logistics, sort of like the recipes and how to do things?
Action is like, I'm ready to go tomorrow.
Yeah. All right.
So that's really setting them up for long-term success. And it is a journey, and it is a journey to get there. I have a lot of people that already come in action who have tried many diets, unsuccessful, have tried the keto diet, weren't doing it correctly, can't figure out, what's going on. So I do get a lot of people already in action. I just kind of have to have them take a step back, reassess, and move forward correctly.
Yeah, it's not like it's a linear process. It's a life. There's nothing in life that's linear. So it's always going to be sort of back and forth and having to reassess and adjust.
And the stages of change really incorporates the idea of relapse.
Right.
and setbacks. So there's determinants that are incorporated into that model too, that when there is a setback or a relapse, that they haven't completely given up. You provide them with skills and tools. Okay, you had a little hiccup here. Don't worry about it. This is what we're going to do. Next time you're in this situation, this is what you're going to do.
Yeah, so if someone's just learning about keto on social media and they're in one of these social media sites where everybody loves keto, everybody loves low carb, high fat, it's the best thing ever, you're going to get all these benefits, and then they start it and they don't necessarily see all those benefits at first, they're going to get frustrated
Right.
and they're going to give up. So that's where someone could benefit working with someone like you, because how would you prepare them for a different course?
Well, I mean, I would explain to them that it's not just you're not gonna lose the 20 pounds in the first week, and with my keto clients now, I'm in daily communication with them.
Yeah.
They need to know. I check in on them. I have a few saying we're not losing weight. I've been on it a week, and I have to keep them motivated and tweak things if they need to be tweaked. But you have to keep them motivated, especially in the beginning, if they're not seeing the immediate effects. And that's why I do what I do. I love doing that. I don't mind being texted at 9 o'clock at night. I'm at this restaurant. There's nothing. What do I do? Or I'm not feeling that great. Or I like to keep them motivated, and that really is an important part and really close to my heart, that this is an individualized, personalized approach. And to get some people through it, I just have to be there for them until they can really go on their own. And as I talked about, having the self-efficacy to take it and run with it.
I love that passion. I love that commitment. And that's certainly not what you're going to get if you just ask your local doctor for nutritional advice. That's for sure. Yeah. So speaking of